Weddings are meant to be symphonies of joy. They should begin with the delicate scent of white roses perfuming the air, with crystalline laughter echoing through grand halls, and with music that weaves families together in a tapestry of celebration. But for Ethan Collins, his sister Emily's wedding day did not begin with a symphony. It began with a single sharp, discordant note, the sound of his mother's hand cracking across his cheek. The impact was a burst of fire, a burning sting that radiated from his skin to the core of his being. The music stuttered and died mid-note. The vibrant river of laughter instantly dammed into a silent, gaping void. Even the cheerful clinking of champagne glasses seemed to evaporate into the thick, heavy air. The entire room, 100 souls dressed in their finest, froze as if turned to stone. Ethan stood there, his cheek blazing a furious red, his body trembling not from pain, but from the bone-deep chill of public humiliation. Every eye in the hall was a spotlight, pinning him to the center of a stage he never asked to be on. He was a young man who had spent his entire life carrying the immense weight of being different. He was gay, and for that single, immutable fact, he had never earned his mother's acceptance. To her, he was not a son, but a stain on the pristine portrait of her carefully constructed family, a shadow she desperately tried to keep at the edges. But now, in front of 100 guests, friends, relatives, and strangers, she had dragged her private disdain into the glaring, public light. Her face was a mask of twisted rage, her fingers still trembling from the force of the strike, as if even she was shocked by the audacity of her own cruelty. Across the aisle, Emily, the bride radiant in white silk just moments before, let out a strangled cry. Tears began to carve pathways through her perfect makeup. "You had no right," she screamed, her voice piercing the silence. "You had no right to ruin this day." Her words were daggers, sharper and more painful than the slap. They came from the sister he adored, the one who had once been the keeper of his secrets, the defender of his heart. Now, she was spitting those secrets back at him, treating him like an intruder in her perfect, storybook world. And then there was Daniel, the groom, the man at the very center of this fractured fairy tale. He didn't move. He didn't speak. His face, once a canvas of charming confidence, had become pale and still. He was a statue carved from the coldest marble, a silent observer as the world unraveled around him, refusing to stand for truth, for love, or for the man who was about to become his brother-in-law. Whispers rippled through the crowd like a contagion. Some guests gasped in horror, while others exchanged knowing glances, as if a long-rumored scandal had finally, satisfyingly, stepped into the light. To Ethan, it felt as if the very walls were leaning in, the ceiling lowering, all waiting to see him crumble under the crushing weight of their collective judgment. But before he could utter a word, before he could even draw a breath against the suffocating silence, a voice rang out. It came not from the bride, the groom, or the mother whose hatred had ignited the fire. It came from the back of the hall, a voice that was low, steady, and edged with the unshakable authority of age and wisdom. It was his grandfather. "Hear me." The old man's words thundered, silencing even the whispers. He rose to his feet, his presence tall and unyielding despite the silver in his hair. His eyes, sharp and clear, locked onto Ethan's mother, then swept to Emily, and finally settled on the frozen figure of Daniel. "Tell them the truth," he declared, each word landing like a gavel on marble. "Or I will." The air in the room crackled with tension, thick with the electricity that precedes a storm. Emily's lips parted in shock. Her mother's jaw tightened in a silent snarl of fury. Daniel's eyes flickered with a sudden, undeniable fear. And Ethan stood between them all, the sting on his face a dull throb against his pounding heart. He hadn't spoken, yet he was the epicenter of a storm he never chose. The wedding that was meant to celebrate love now teetered on the precipice of ruin. Not because of who he was, but because of secrets that refused to stay buried any longer. In that single, breathtaking instant, Ethan understood the true nature of silence. It wasn't safety. It was a cage. And when a cage like that finally breaks, it shatters everything at once. The silence that followed his grandfather's ultimatum was a living, breathing thing, heavy and suffocating. Emily's bouquet of white roses trembled in her hands. She turned to her brother, her eyes, once filled with a soft, protective warmth, now burning with a cold fire of accusation. The pristine white of her dress seemed almost cruel, a stark contrast to the venom that dripped from her next words. "It was you, wasn't it?" she hissed, her voice rising, sharp enough to cut through the hush-star of the crowd. "You sent those photographs." Before Ethan could even process the accusation, their mother's voice sliced through the air, louder and more furious than her earlier slap. "Yes, it was him. Who else could it be?" Her tone was a cocktail of certainty and disgust, as if every drop of contempt she had ever felt for her son had finally found its moment of release. Photographs. Ethan's mind raced, a blank canvas of confusion. But the whispers spreading through the hall quickly painted a picture for him. Photographs of Daniel, the groom, with another woman. Hard, undeniable proof of betrayal. Evidence that the carefully sculpted golden groom was cracked beneath the surface. A knot of ice formed in Ethan's chest. His sister's glare felt like a physical assault, stabbing him with 1,000 tiny knives. Emily, the girl who had once fiercely defended him against bullies who mocked his rainbow pins, now stood ready to believe the absolute worst of him. "How could you do this to me, Ethan?" Her voice was raw, broken by sobs, but laced with an unyielding fury. "To destroy my wedding. To shame me in front of everyone I know." Her pain was a river that had overflowed its banks, and that river of anger had found its scapegoat him. Guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some nodded in grim agreement, their faces masks of pity and disapproval. Others stared at Ethan as if betrayal itself were a disease he carried. He opened his mouth, the words catching in his throat like thorns. "I didn't do it." He finally managed to say, his voice a trembling whisper. "Emily, I swear I didn't." But his plea was a feather in a hurricane, lost in the storm of disbelief. His mother sneered, her lip curling. "You expect us to believe you? Look at him," she spat, gesturing toward her son as if he were an exhibit of poison. Always jealous, always craving attention. Of course, it was him. Yet the one person who could have ended it all remained silent. Daniel. The groom's silence was a confession more damning than any words. He stood there, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white, his eyes fixed on the floor. He did not deny the affair. He did not defend Ethan. He simply stood there, a man cornered by his own lies, his cowardice a deafening roar in the quiet room. For Ethan, it was a double-edged betrayal. The first, from a mother who had always hated him for who he was. The second, from a man whose silence was an act of profound cowardice, allowing the full weight of suspicion to crash down upon him. The wedding hall had transformed into a courtroom without walls, where every glance was a verdict and every whisper a sentence. He looked at Emily, at the black mascara streaking down her beautiful, heartbroken face. He wanted to scream that he loved her, that he would rather walk through fire than cause her pain. But his words were dust. The cruel machinery of assumption had already been set in motion. Once people decide where guilt belongs, the truth rarely finds its way back. In that moment, Ethan learned that lies are not always spoken. Sometimes they are carved from silence. Sometimes they are written in the refusal to defend the innocent, and sometimes they grow in the barren soil where courage has died. He stood there, condemned without trial, his heart breaking not just from the sting of accusation, but from the devastating realization that the love of a family can fracture in an instant when it is clouded by fear and shame. Just as the verdict of guilt seemed to fall permanently upon Ethan, the sharp scrape of wood against marble cut through the tension. His grandfather had risen. His steps were slow but deliberate, each one landing with an unshakable certainty that seemed to pull the room's gravity toward him. As he moved to the front, He slipped his hand into his suit pocket. He stopped before the altar, his gaze sweeping over the scene of chaos. Emily, a crumpled vision in white. Daniel, staring at his shoes as if they held the answers to the universe. His daughter, rigid with rage, and his grandson, Ethan, pale and trembling. No one here seems interested in the truth, his grandfather said, his voice calm yet commanding. So I sought it myself. From his pocket, he produced a small, black USB drive. He handed it to the wedding technician. The large screen behind the altar, meant for a slideshow of happy memories, flickered to life. The footage was grainy, clearly from a security camera, but the images were unmistakable. Daniel, in the very suit he wore now, stood in a hotel corridor. A woman met him at the door. The embrace that followed was not one of friendship. It was intimate, hungry, the kind of passion born from a secret too long kept. A collective gasp swept through the hall like a wildfire. Emily staggered back as if she'd been physically struck. Her bouquet slipped from her grasp, the white rose petals scattering across the floor like fallen tears. Her face, drained of all color, was a reflection of a heartbreak so profound it eclipsed all anger. "Turn it off." Daniel finally barked, his voice cracking as he lunged for the projector, but it was too late. His betrayal had been broadcast for all to see. The silence that followed was colder than a tomb. Slowly, Ethan's mother turned her gaze from her son to the groom. The fire in her eyes had not died, it had simply found a new target. "Get out," she hissed, her voice trembling with the dual poisons of fury and humiliation. "Get out of this hall right now." Daniel looked at Emily, a silent plea in his eyes, but she turned away, unable to bear the sight of him. Defeated, he lowered his head and walked toward the exit, a tide of judgment and whispers following him out the door. The wedding was over. Vindication. Ethan should have felt it, but he felt nothing but a hollow ache. The truth was out, but the damage was done. His sister's trust had been shattered, and his name had been dragged through the mud. No amount of proof could erase the wound of being doubted by the people he loved most. As the guests began to file out, his grandfather approached him again. He reached into his coat and pressed a sealed envelope into Ethan's hand. "I received this early this morning," he said softly. "It belongs to you." Ethan's fingers trembled as he opened it. Inside were more photographs, not of Daniel, but of a shadowy figure placing the USB drive on his grandfather's doorstep. The figure's stance, the coat she wore, it was unmistakable. It was his mother. He turned to her, the envelope held out like a verdict. "It was you," he whispered, his voice cracking not with anger, but with the raw, gaping wound of this final, ultimate betrayal. "You left the drive, and you let them all blame me." She didn't flinch. Her eyes were cold as ice. "Yes," she said, her tone laced with a cruel pride. She would have never believed the truth if it came from a simple tip. She needed a villain. If she thought you were guilty, she would have clung to Daniel just to spite you. She needed to see his lies for herself. I gave her that. You didn't just expose him. Ethan choked out, shaking his head in disbelief. You sacrificed me. You used me because I was the one you were willing to throw away. For a fleeting second, something flickered in her eyes. Doubt, perhaps, or a sliver of shame. But it vanished. Don't pretend to be surprised, she said, her voice merciless. You have always been the stain on this family. Your sister's happiness was worth more than the dignity of a son who chose that path. The words hit him harder than the slap. He had always known she didn't accept him, but to hear it stated so plainly, that his worth was less than nothing, was a wound that would never fully close. It was then that Emily returned, her veil gone, her face a mess of tears and fury. She had seen the second envelope. She held the photos of their mother in her shaking hand. You let this happen, she cried, her voice echoing in the empty hall. You let my brother be hated, accused, and shamed, all to prove a point. It was necessary, her mother replied, her chin held high. I saved you. No, Emily sobbed, clutching the photos, Love isn't sacrificing one child to save another. He's my brother, and I will not let you destroy him just because you cannot accept who he is." Emily rushed to Ethan's side, wrapping her arms around him in a fierce, protective embrace. A few remaining guests, who had lingered to watch the final act of this tragedy, began to clap. It started as a hesitant patter, then grew into a wave of applause, not for a broken wedding, but for a sister's love. Their father, silent until now, stepped forward. He placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, his grip firm and steady. In that one gesture, years of unspoken distance melted away. He then gently guided both his children toward the door, leaving their mother to stand alone amidst the crushed roses and shattered promises. Weeks later, a message buzzed on Ethan's phone. It was Daniel asking to meet to explain. Ethan looked at the text for a long moment, then, with a calm finality, he pressed delete. He didn't need explanations or apologies. The wedding was lost, but something far more precious had been found. He had his sister's fierce loyalty. He had his father's quiet acceptance. He was no longer a shadow at the edge of the family portrait. That day, in the ruins of a perfect wedding, Ethan finally found the kind of love that truly matters. Not the love that demands perfection, but the love that sees you, accepts you, and chooses you exactly as you are.